Chapter 268, Sword Emperor? Chapter 268, Sword Emperor? What happened? They're gone. Be it Soulfire's members or Nightblade's members, everyone was dumbfounded by what just happened. Even Daybreak Mist couldn't help but rub her eyes and take another look. When Balrog Heart's Flame God's spear appeared, Daybreak Mist had felt the presence of death enveloping her. The power of the attack had already gone beyond her ability to survive. In front of this attack, the average titled expert was nothing but a joke. This was because Balrog Heart's attack had already reached a level where it could destroy an entire town. Upon realizing Balrog Heart's strength, Daybreak Mist couldn't help but feel suffocated. Yet, Shifeng's attack had not only erased Balrog Heart's full-powered attack, but it had also left a gash in the ocean that extended for several kilometers. Rain, are you really sure this person is the guild leader Black Flame you mentioned? Daybreak Mist whispered to Moon Rain, trying to seek further confirmation. This was Balrog Heart they were talking about, the 21st ranked player on the God-ranked expert list. Yet, not only did Black Flame defeat Balrog Heart, but he had even accomplished it in one move. This was a feat that probably only the monsters ranked within the God-ranked expert list's top 10 could accomplish. It should be known that every one of these top 10 monsters was an existence capable of monopolizing an entire medium shipyard. Meanwhile, not only could a medium shipyard generate tremendous amounts of wealth for a power, but it could also increase the chances of a power being recruited by a conglomerate in the future. It was the dream of countless powers to join a conglomerate in the greater god's domain. Unfortunately, generally speaking, only upper-ranking hegemonic powers could catch the attention of conglomerates and become a part of a conglomerate. However, now that the miniature ancient world had become a gathering place for the myriad worlds, an immense amount of wealth was gathered here. Moreover, many ore veins capable of producing 7 luminaries crystals have been discovered across the top of 2 worlds. If a power could dominate a sizable portion of the miniature ancient world, even if said power wasn't an upper-ranking hegemonic power, it might still have a chance of catching the various conglomerates' attention. After all, 7 luminaries crystals were a rare commodity that was in high demand no matter where one went. Even if a power was weak, so long as it could generate enough 7 luminaries crystals, the various conglomerates wouldn't mind extending an olive branch to it. It should be, Moon Rain answered hesitantly. At this moment, even Moon Rain couldn't help but grow uncertain. Although she knew that Black Flame was powerful, she never thought he would be so powerful as to kill Balrog Heart in one move. While Moon Rain and Daybreak Mist were talking, Shifeng waved his hand at the items Balrog Heart and Divine Hunter's other members dropped. Immediately, the items dropped by these 100-plus players flew toward him. Then, he began stuffing the items into his bag one after another. This is a large sea map. Shifeng was pleasantly surprised as he looked at the tattered map in his hands. Generally, when players entered a region they had never visited, their system map would only display their nearby surroundings. If players wished to have a more informative map of the region, they would have to explore the region in person. Either that or they could purchase a region map from a nearby NPC city. If players wanted to operate out at sea, a sea map was an indispensable item. This was because a sea map would not only display islands that wouldn't be displayed on the system map, but it also covered a large area. Moreover, the sea map would also mark the player's specific location, preventing players from getting lost while navigating at sea. Typically, sea maps could be divided into small, medium, and large sizes. Each size category of sea map would also cover an increasingly larger area. Small sea maps would cover an area roughly the size of 2 or 3 land-based leveling maps, medium sea maps would cover 7 or 8 leveling maps, and large sea maps would cover at least 20 leveling maps. During the exploration phase of a region, a large sea map could easily be worth 2 or 3 fragmented legendary items. So, it was a truly pleasant surprise to Shifeng that Balrog Heart would gift a large sea map to him. It should be known that he had only helped Soulfire get rid of Balrog Heart in passing. He never really thought of gaining anything from this action. After all, Soulfire had already joined the Azura Mercenary Alliance. Moreover, Moon Rain had given Wu Lingling a lot of help thus far. So, he naturally had to help Moon Rain now that the other party was in trouble. As for how Shifeng managed to eliminate Balrog Heart so easily, It was because Balrog was only a Tier 3 player. There was a significant gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 players. Not to mention, Shafong was even equipped with the Blazing Flame set, a level 120 Dark Gold Immortal set. It might be a different story if Balrog had reached Tier 4 already, but before that happened, Shafong would only need one move to take care of him. So this place is the top of two worlds. Shafong was a little surprised after he was done inspecting the sea map. He didn't think that the top of two worlds would be a world within a world. Moreover, it was quite a huge world. At the very least, judging by the information he gleaned from the map, the top of two worlds should be significantly larger than the miniature ancient world. The nearest NPC city from here is Crying Sea City. I should head there and get some rest. Afterward, Shafong stored the sea map and flew toward Crying Sea City. His flying away. It will take him over 10 hours to reach Crying Sea City even if he can fly with his mana domain. Even if he exhausts his concentration, there's no way he can reach the city, right? Could he have reached Tier 4 already? Everyone was stunned when they saw Shafong flying into the distance. A Tier 3 player could fly so long as they had a mana domain. However, flying via this method consumed a lot of concentration, so flying for long periods of time wouldn't be possible. Seeing as Shafong was flying in Crying Sea City's direction, he should be aware of the city's existence. In that case, he should also know that the city was over 10 hours away from their current location. Yet, he had still chosen to fly there. This could only mean that he had already reached Tier 4 and gained the ability to fly for long periods of time. Only, Tier 4 should still be a goal far out of the reach of the miniature ancient world's various powers. Although many hegemonic powers had already found Tier 4 legacy lands, a few days had only passed since the first batch of challengers had left to challenge their Tier 4 promotion. Going by the average time it took for players to complete their Tier 4 promotion, this first batch of challengers would still need at least 10 days before they could complete their promotion. There was an incredible gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 classes. If Shafong had indeed reached Tier 4 already, it wouldn't even be an exaggeration to say that he was invincible in the current miniature ancient world. A Tier 4 Sword Emperor? Moonrain's eyes lit up in excitement as she looked at Shafong's departing back. Crying Sea City is probably going to see a change of hands soon. Crying Sea City was a gathering place for over 100 million players, and it was currently under the rule of two tyrants, Divine Hunters and Morning Light. Both were hegemonic powers originating from a higher god's domain, and they had ruled over the city ever since players gained access to the top of two worlds. Now, though, Crying Sea City might be seeing a change of hands. So, this is the strength Azura has kept hidden? Daybreak Mist also fell into a daze after coming across this revelation. It was already astonishing that Shafong had managed to kill Balrog. The fact that Shafong had reached Tier 4 was even more surprising. Daybreak Mist couldn't help but reevaluate her opinion of the Azura Mercenary Alliance. At the same time, she also decided that she would have her adventurer team join Azura as soon as she returned. Meanwhile, shortly after Shafong left, news of Balrog's death also reached Crying Sea City, the news making waves in the city. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 269, Tier 4 Powerhouse. Chapter 269, Tier 4 Powerhouse 2 Worlds Sea, Crying Sea City. Crying Sea City was one of the few super-large NPC cities present in the Two Worlds Sea, and it had become the gathering place of countless powers from the myriad gods' domains. However, out of all these powers, only two guilds had successfully garrisoned Crying Sea City, Divine Hunters and Morning Light. Both guilds possessed a guild residence in the city's central area. Because of this, the two guilds' members could freely teleport into the city via guild transfer scrolls. This situation not only caused the various powers and players to grow envious, but it also established the two guilds' authority in Crying Sea City. As for powers that failed to garrison Crying Sea City, they could only compete for the limited number of temporary guild halls available at the city's Adventurers Association. The guild leader killed Balrog. Su Qianliu, who was resting in her office, was shocked when she heard the report Wu Lingling had just made to her. "Are you sure about this?" This matter has already reached the ears of Crying Sea City's various hegemonic powers, so it shouldn't be wrong. Soulfire has also messaged us offline saying that the guild leader is on his way to Crying Sea City, Wu Lingling said excitedly. Because of this, the number of adventurer teams looking to join Azura has increased substantially. Everyone thinks that Azura can secure an administrative seat during the upcoming medium shipyard competition. Ships were the basis of survival in the Two Worlds Sea. Players couldn't do without ships if they wished to make progress here. However, obtaining ships from NPCs was incredibly difficult and costly. If players wished to acquire a large number of ships at an affordable price, their only option was to construct them at a shipyard. The only problem was that players needed to compete for the administrative rights of the various NPC cities' shipyards. Every shipyard had a fixed number of administrative seats, and this number would typically range from 2 to 3. So long as a power managed to secure a seat, it could spend materials to mass-produce ships. The advantages and wealth a power could generate through this were self-evident. Meanwhile, powers looking to compete for a shipyard's administrative seats could only send 6 experts to represent them. So, one could imagine how much of an advantage the Azura Mercenary Alliance would have if one of its representatives was a powerhouse capable of defeating the 21st ranked Balrog Heart. Not to mention, the Azura Mercenary Alliance's experts had grown significantly because of all the clashes they've had with the Myriad Worlds experts and the Primordial Towers effect. They've grown so much that Shafong would probably be surprised when he saw them. With the help of a top 20 godlist expert, it was entirely possible for the Azura Mercenary Alliance to secure an administrative seat in the upcoming competition. The guild leader is on his way here. Su Qianliu's expression suddenly changed when she heard Wu Lingling's words. Lingling, notify Hidden Soul and have her bring a team outside the city to meet up with the guild leader immediately. I'll head over with a team as well. What's wrong, Vice Guild Leader? Wu Lingling asked in confusion. The nail that sticks out gets hammered. While contacting some trustworthy core members of Zero Wing in the city, Su Qianliu explained, the various powers in Crying Sea City have only ignored Zero Wing and Azura previously because we were only inconspicuous powers. Even establishing a foothold in the city had taken us a lot of effort. However, now that we've suddenly become a strong contender for Crying Sea City's medium shipyard and there are only a few days left before the medium shipyard competition, how do you think Crying Sea City's various hegemonic powers will react? How will Divine Hunters and Morning Light react? They'll destroy the guild leader. Wu Lingling suddenly felt a chill crawling down her spine, her expression turning somber. Whoever gained control over Crying Sea City's shipyards would gain dominance over the city. Currently, Divine Hunters and Morning Light only held control over Crying Sea City's small shipyard. Even then, they had already become nigh invincible out at sea. They had also gained control over an important or vein out at sea. A medium shipyard was capable of manufacturing ships of higher ranking than what a small shipyard could manufacture. If a power managed to secure it, its naval power would definitely skyrocket. Shafong was the Azura Mercenary Alliance's only hope for winning an administrative seat. So long as the various hegemonic powers could kill Shafong once, they would have one less competitor in the upcoming medium shipyard competition. That's right. Su Qianliu nodded. The guild leader might have the strength to kill someone as strong as Balrog Heart, but the mysterious energy at sea is incredibly violent. If the various hegemonic powers surround him, it won't be difficult for them to kill him. So, we must meet with the guild leader before the other powers find him. The top of Two Worlds was different from the rest of the miniature ancient world. Players could only communicate via the system if they were within a certain range of each other. At most, this range was enough to cover an entire city. Hence, it was incredibly difficult for players to communicate over long distances. If players wished to do so, offline communication would be the quickest method. However, they evidently couldn't contact Shafong via offline means now that he had already left for the greater world. So, their only option was to send people to find Shafong. Search hosted novel for the original. I understand. I'll go and inform Big Sis Soul right away, Wu Lingling said before quickly logging out of the game. Zero Wing might be the heart of the Azura Mercenary Alliance, but the Mercenary Alliance's various teams did not operate in the same area. The quickest way to gather these teams would be to contact them offline. Not long after Su Qianliu and the others began making their move, a figure suddenly got enveloped by a magic barrier in the sky a short distance from Crying Sea City. Subsequently, a fleet of more than 500 advanced ships quickly gathered underneath the barrier. This was a rare sight even in Crying Sea City, and the ships passing by couldn't help but avoid this massive fleet. Damn it! We were too late. When Hidden Soul saw the figure enveloped in the magic barrier, her complexion turned incredibly gloomy. Hidden Soul had rushed back to Crying Sea City as soon as she heard the news from Wu Lingling. She originally thought that she could get in touch with Shifeng first since friend communication had a much bigger range. Yet, Crying Sea City's various hegemonic powers still managed to get ahead of her. What is the meaning of this? Shifeng asked, a slight frown forming on his face as he looked at the four people before him. Shifeng was rather familiar with these four people. They were Titan Sword One Step, 100 Beast Florence, Dark Banner Melissa, and Shadow Emperor Convicted. All four were famous individuals in the Greater God's domain. At the same time, they were also veteran-titled monsters. During their younger days, they were not the slightest bit weaker than the current Balrog Heart. Take Divine Hunter's One Step, for example. Although he was in his 50s now, he was more talented than even Balrog Heart, having received a title from the Seven Luminaries Alliance at the young age of 25. As for why he had received the title of Titan Sword, it was because he possessed the Titan bloodline, an extremely rare bloodline even in the Greater God's domain. It was the bloodline of Titans, an apex race that rivaled dragons. The bloodline granted One Step with strength and physique that was beyond his tier. As for Divine Hunter's Florence, he received his title because of his unique class beast illusionist. He could absorb the strength of God's domain's monsters and turn it into his own. The more powerful monsters he defeated, the greater his strength would become. As for Dark Banner Melissa and Shadow Emperor Convicted, both were peerless monsters belonging to Morning Light. When they fought, they were just as strong as One Step and Florence. Among them, Melissa possessed a special legacy that granted her incredible affinity with the water attribute. She would essentially become invincible among opponents of the same tier when fighting out at sea. Although these four people didn't have very high levels, all four being at level 122 only, the life aura they radiated indicated that they were all bona fide tier 4 players. You must be Zero Wings Black Flame, right? It seems you have indeed reached tier 4 already. One Step, clad in dark grey plate armor and carrying a great sword that was as tall as he was, said as he looked at Shifeng arrogantly. I am Divine Hunter's One Step. Divine Hunters will only give you two options, submit or die. It seems you are quite lucky to be able to reach tier 4 so quickly, Melissa, dressed in a black dress, said as she looked at Shifeng indifferently. If you submit to Morning Light can ensure your safety. Of the two people that spoke, one was arrogant while the other was indifferent. However, the meaning their words conveyed was obvious. Submit or die. There was no third option. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 270, 1/Outside the City. Chapter 270, 1/Outside the City. TL Notes. Changes made to Chapter 257, Anomaly-Paragon changes made to Chapter 265, One of Two Little Monsters - One of Two Paragons changes made to Chapter 269, Veteran-Titled Monsters - Veteran-Titled Paragons Peerless Monsters - Peerless Paragons. Shortly after Divine Hunters and Morning Light's Tier 4 experts appeared, chaos ensued among the massive fleet of advanced ships gathered beneath them. Damn it! Damn it! Now that Divine Hunters and Morning Light have taken action simultaneously, our chances of recruiting him are gone. Judging by the auras those four are radiating, they've definitely reached tier 4 already. I really did not think Divine Hunters and Morning Light had hidden so much of their strength. It seems we have truly underestimated them. I heard that the city's medium shipyard only has 2 administrative slots. How are we supposed to compete with those 2 guilds now? The various powers making up the massive fleet of advanced ships were greatly shocked when they saw Divine Hunters and Morning Light dispatching a total of 4 tier 4 experts. None of them thought that Divine Hunters and Morning Light had hidden so much of their strength. While the various powers were making a fuss over Divine Hunters and Morning Light's show of power, a noble-looking lady with long cyan hair and a pair of silver eyes was sipping tea as she observed this situation. Then, she looked toward the demi-dragon woman next to her and smiled, saying, "It seems our trip this time wasn't a waste, after all, Maria. Divine Hunters and Morning Light have hidden a lot more strength than what was mentioned in the reports. But it seems they've decided to go big to deal with Black Flame. Moreover, they've even sent One Step and Melissa out of all people. It's not every day you get to see such a grand occasion. You're still in the mood for jokes, auntie? Your niece has already wagered all of her resources into Abyssal Star City. If Zero Wing suffers a massive setback here, it'll definitely affect Abyssal Star City." Maria, who was clad in silver armor, complained. "Are you just going to watch as your cute and obedient little niece suffers? When an ordinary expert killed a player, the player in question would typically only lose one level. However, experts of One Step and Melissa's caliber could inflict heavy damage to the souls of the players they killed. They could accomplish this even if they were only at Tier 4 right now. Meanwhile, not only would the players they kill lose several levels, but these players would also have their souls remain weakened for around half a month. During this period, they'd be utterly useless in combat. They were currently at the crucial exploration phase of the Two Worlds Sea. Being rendered useless for half a month was a fate worse than death. It was especially true for a Tier 4 player. It's his fault for not keeping a low profile. He shouldn't have killed Balrog Heart in just one move. Balrog Heart's strength is already the ceiling for Tier 3 players. There are only two types of people who can possibly kill him with one move. The first type would be the God List's top 10 monsters or someone of their standards, while the second type would be Tier 4 experts. Experts of those top 10 monsters' caliber are exceedingly rare, and you'd be hard-pressed to find even one such expert in an elementary god's domain. So, the only logical explanation would be that Black Flame has reached Tier 4, Favre said before pausing to take a sip of tea. Then, she continued, "Currently, even one Tier 4 player is enough to affect a naval city's status quo. Divine Hunters and Morning Light naturally won't sit by and watch another power rising up to match them. Had Black Flame spent some time killing Balrog Heart, Divine Hunters and Morning Light might have made a response, but they would have never mobilized One Step and Melissa. Even the God List's top 10 monsters will have trouble escaping from such a lineup. Can't you help him, auntie?" Maria asked as she looked at Favre hopefully and anxiously. "Not now," Favre said, shaking her head. Then, she looked up at the sky and continued, "As a fourth-floor expert, Black Flame can definitely hold his ground for some time. He'll have a greater chance of escaping if I act when they are busy fighting." Maria felt relieved when she heard Favre's answer. Titan Sword One Step and Dark Banner Melissa were paragons of an older generation. However, her Aunt Favre was also a paragon of the same generation. Moreover, her Aunt Favre had achieved massive improvements in recent years. It was just that her Aunt Favre mainly operated solo, so few people actually knew about her true strength. At this point, her Aunt Favre should be just as strong as the God-ranked expert list's top 10 monsters. Although her Aunt Favre would not be able to defeat the joint force of One Step, Melissa, and two other Tier 4 experts, she should have no trouble helping Black Flame escape. While Maria and Favre were talking, the atmosphere in the sky suddenly changed, and many people on the sea subconsciously shuddered. "You refuse." One Step's arrogant expression instantly turned cold, the runes on his epic armor suddenly glowing and causing the surrounding space to tremble. "You impertinent brat. It seems you are tired of living." As soon as One Step finished speaking, the pitch-black greatsword on his back disappeared and reappeared above Chifong's head. One Step had drawn his weapon and executed his attack so swiftly that the spectators below could only see a black flash appearing briefly in the sky. Moreover, One Step's attack was incredibly discreet, not creating any sound or spatial fluctuations throughout the entire process. Yet, his attack carried enough power to compress the space around Chifong, making it difficult for Chifong to move his body. Meanwhile, in response to this sudden attack, Chifong drew his sword to block it. "What an interesting kid. It's a pity his career is over after this," Melissa thought. When she saw the attack One Step executed, She got ready to turn around and leave, not planning to waste any more time here. It might seem like one flash had only executed one slash, but he had, in fact, executed multiple slashes. It was just that these slashes had combined to create the illusion of an arc of light that descended toward Shifeng. Black Moon. It was an advanced silver combat technique, and it was also One Step's trademark move. When combined with his fragmented legendary greatsword, he could heavily injure even a superior mythic monster of the same level. Even a tier 4 metric tons would die on the spot if they tried to receive this attack without activating any life-saving skills, much less a tier 4 swordsman. So, when Melissa saw Shifeng trying to block One Step's attack, she could already foresee what would happen. Boom! A loud explosion shook the battlefield, the intense shockwaves causing the sky to shatter. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, two figures appeared in their sight as the world rapidly worked to mend the shattered sky. Both figures remained standing proudly amidst the sky of spatial fissures. He didn't die. Melissa and the other spectators were greatly confused when they saw Shifeng alive and healthy. Unlike what they expected, not only did Shifeng not die, but he didn't even receive any damage from blocking One Step's attack. However, compared to Melissa and the others, One Step felt an even greater shock. This was because when his great sword clashed with Shifeng's long sword, he felt as if he had struck an impenetrable wall. His arms had even gone numb from the reactionary force. Did he use an invulnerability skill? This was the first thought that came to One Step's mind. However, he quickly denied this thought. Invulnerability skills only prevented players from taking damage. It wouldn't mitigate the force of an impact, much less turn players into an impenetrable wall. If Shifeng didn't have enough strength to block his attack, he would still be sent flying, even if he used an invulnerability skill. However, before One Step could figure out what had happened, Shifeng leisurely said, "Since you've made your move, it's my turn now." TL notes. 1. You refuse? Phi. There is no missing translation before this part. The Raws never described Shifeng refusing, so the refusal must have happened while the story's perspective was changed to Maria and Favre. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 271, Twilight of the Gods. Chapter 271, Twilight of the Gods. TL notes. Changed convicted to convict. You're strong, kid, I'll give you that. But do you think this is over? One Step might have felt surprised when he saw Shifeng blocking his attack without using an invulnerability skill, but his calm expression remained unfazed. Before One Step had even finished his words, a figure suddenly appeared behind Shifeng. This figure belonged to none other than 100 Beast Florence, a hulking man over 2 meters tall and clad in beast leather. At this time, Florence's eyes had turned blood red, and the phantom of a 50-meter-tall golden lion had formed around him. The aura the golden lion radiated was stronger than the aura of level 122 superior mythic monsters. Immediately afterward, the golden lion swung its claws at Shifeng, the razor-sharp appendages the size of houses. The claws were so large that they covered even One Step in their attack range. Indeed, the instant One Step had made his move against Shifeng, Florence had also gone into action. So, even if One Step's attack failed to kill Shifeng, Florence would finish the job. However, before Florence's attack could connect, a black-clad figure suddenly appeared on Shifeng's other side. Then, the crimson short sword this black-clad figure wielded transformed into several dozen streaks of crimson light that struck Shifeng from his blind spots. Convict. Mind your own damn business. Florence cursed when he saw the black-clad figure. The timing and angle of Shadow Emperor Convict's attacks were perfectly on point. He chose to attack the moment Shifeng had lifted his head to look at Florence's golden lion. A sneak attack of such caliber was something even One Step would fail to react to should he be the target. However, before Florence's cursing could even reach Convict's ears, the Shadow Emperor coldly said, "Nobody is allowed to live after refusing morning light." Repentance. This was Convict's ultimate move. The 41 strikes Convict executed with this combat technique were like laser beams, their speed exceeding the speed of sound and the limit of a Tier 4 player's reaction speed. Only someone like Convict, gifted with extraordinary nervous reactions, could execute such a move. Just when the 41 sword lights and the golden lion's gigantic claws were about to land on Shifeng, a second sword suddenly appeared in Shifeng's left hand. Break! After letting out a low shout, Shifeng brandished his two swords and shrouded himself in a galaxy of stars. Whether it was the golden lion's claws or the crimson sword lights, both had their advance halted when they came into contact with these stars. Unlike the previous clash between One Step and Shifeng, the clash of attacks this time generated hardly any shockwaves. Instead, only the sound of metal ringing could be heard echoing continuously across the sky. When Florence and Convict eventually concluded their attacks, their expressions turned solemn. An uproar also occurred among the various powers underneath when they saw the outcome of this exchange. After all, Shifeng had successfully held his ground against 100 Beast Florence and Shadow Emperor Convict simultaneously. Such an accomplishment was enough to put him into the top 10 ranks of the God-ranked expert list. Who is this kid? How did he manage to deflect all of my attacks? Convict's eyes no longer contained his previous coldness when he looked at Shifeng. Instead, taking its place was a trace of fear. Ever since he had risen to fame, Convict rarely met anyone who could match him in attack speed at the same tier. This was the case even among titled experts. Yet, Shifeng had not only matched his attack speed but also deflected all of his attacks. This was a situation he had never encountered before. "I'm afraid the four of us will have to work together to take down this kid," Florence said, a grim look on his face. From an outsider's perspective, it might seem like Shifeng had fought the two of them to a standstill. However, as someone who had clashed with Shifeng, Florence could tell that none of his attacks had managed to threaten Shifeng. This situation was completely different from what they imagined. They had severely underestimated Shifeng, thinking he had only relied on his advantage in tiers to overwhelm Balrog Heart. Melissa, who had originally planned to leave, sighed as she looked at Shifeng. Then, she said, "Although I don't want to, I guess we have no better choice." If Divine Hunters and Morning Light failed to kill Shifeng even after mobilizing 4 Tier 4 experts, their two guilds would definitely become a laughingstock in Crying Sea City. However, the strength Shifeng had just displayed showed that he was in no way inferior to the God-ranked expert list's top 10 monsters. If they wanted to kill Shifeng, their only option was for all four of them to work together. Otherwise, neither Divine Hunters nor Morning Light should consider killing Shifeng. As soon as Melissa nodded in agreement, One Step, Florence, and Shadow Emperor promptly got ready to use their respective specialties. Meanwhile, when Favre noticed this scene from down below, her expression turned serious as she promptly picked up the silver staff resting against her chair. "Are those four planning to attack together? How can this be?" Hidden Soul and the others also despaired when they saw this situation. 4 Tier 4 titled experts. The combat power of such a lineup was definitely at the miniature ancient world's very apex. Even a monster as strong as Shifeng would have no chance of surviving against such a lineup. However, before Hidden Soul and the others could recover from their despair and make a response, the four titled experts in the sky made their move. One Step brandished his greatsword after activating his Tier 4 legacy skill Titan's Wrath, the skill increasing his strength attribute to the Tier 5 standard. Now, whenever he swung his great sword, even the Tier 3 players down below found themselves immobilized by the compressed space around them. Meanwhile, the Golden Lion Florence had transformed into released an angry roar, its size doubling. Then, the Golden Lion used the Tier 4 legacy skill Golden Roar at Shifeng, the skill's activation dyeing the sky in a golden hue. As for Convict, he used his Tier 4 legacy skill Shadow Extermination, instantly splitting into over 100 doppelgangers that flickered around and attacked Shifeng from all directions. Lastly, Melissa raised the sky blue flag she wielded, causing the sea's surface within a 1,000-yard radius to rise like an awakened beast and directing this beast to devour Shifeng. When these four people took action, the scene they created looked nothing like a battle between players but rather an epic war in ancient mythology instead. The sheer power these four people's attacks radiated caused the various powers' young talents to feel as if death had come to greet them. The power of these attacks was so overwhelming that it made even Favre, who had thought of moving to save Shifeng, feel powerless. Yet, when faced with these seemingly apocalyptic attacks, Shifeng did not choose to dodge them. Instead, he simply sheathed Blasphemer and raised the Winter of Eternal Night with both hands. Then, he swung the sword at the space in front of him. Second sword, Holy Devour. This would be the first time Shifeng had executed Holy Devour with all of his strength after becoming a Tier 4 Sword Law Saint. The Holy Annihilation Mana technique was the Heavenly Blue Saint's greatest achievement. The Mana technique could unleash power capable of overwhelming even Tier 6 gods. The technique was divided into 3 parts, each with a greater usage requirement than the other. Out of the 3 parts, first sword, Light Shadow could only barely be used at Tier 3. As for second sword, Holy Devour, it wasn't something a Tier 3 player could use. As for why Shifeng could use Holy Devour when he was at Tier 3, it was because he had thoroughly mastered the Holy Annihilation Mana technique. Even so, he could never unleash Holy Devour's true strength. Even when he was going up against Tia Paulana, the 8-winged Valkyrie, the Holy Devours he executed were incomplete. However, now that he had reached Tier 4, he had barely met the requirement to execute the complete Holy Devour. Subsequently, as soon as Shifeng swung his sword, mana within a 1,000-yard radius of him exploded and ignited into flames, transforming the sky into a sea of flames. At the same time, the attacks of One Step, Florence, Convict, and Melissa were reduced to nothing by this sea of flames. As for the attackers themselves, all 4 of them were sent flying over 100 yards away, their HP falling by over 1/3. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 272, The True Way of Using Holy Devour. Chapter 272, The True Way of Using Holy Devour. I'm no match for him in a frontal clash? One Step couldn't help but be shocked and confused as he looked at his trembling hands. The Titans were a race known for having incomparable strength. Even dragons were inferior to Titans when it came to strength. Logically, the combination of his Titan bloodline, Dragonblade, and Tier 4 legacy skill Titan's Wrath should allow him to damage even a Tier 5 monster in a frontal clash. Yet, the strength One Step prided himself in had actually lost to Shifeng. At this moment, One Step wasn't the only one confused by this outcome. Everyone else present was in a similar situation. The combat power One Step, Florence, Convict, and Melissa had displayed was sufficient to destroy even an entire city. Their combat power definitely ranked at the apex of the current miniature ancient world. Yet, the 4 were no match for Shifeng even after joining forces. They had even lost over 1/3 of their HP. The strength Shifeng displayed was no longer just terrifying. It was simply incomprehensible. The only person unsurprised by this situation was Shifeng himself. It was true that One Step and the others possessed combat power at the apex of Tier 4. However, it should be known that Shifeng was equipped with the Blazing Flame set, which granted basic attributes equivalent to a level 135 Dark Gold equipment set. In comparison, while One Step and the others might be equipped with epic equipment sets, their sets only granted a level 122 epic equipment set's basic attributes. A gap of 13 levels wasn't something that could be overcome by just a difference of 1 rank. Search hosted novel for the original. Not to mention, when Shifeng completed his promotion and became a Tier 4 Sword Law Saint, the basic attributes he received as a reward was significantly greater than other classes. So, even if One Step and the others worked together, there was no way they could gain an advantage over Shifeng's Holy Devour. A mana technique. It's a saint-ranked mana technique, Melissa said as she wiped the blood that had flowed down the corner of her mouth, a trace of fear appearing in her eyes when she looked at Shifeng. Moreover, it's a perfectly mastered saint-ranked mana technique. This is really bad. Saint-ranked mana techniques were extremely rare even in the greater gods domain, their rarity not the slightest bit lower than gold combat techniques. Meanwhile, every expert she knew who had managed to perfectly master a saint-ranked mana technique held the position of honorary elder in the Seven Luminaries Alliance. Unlike gold combat techniques, while saint-ranked mana techniques did not grant players an instant boost in combat power, it had the advantage of being able to grow stronger as players reached higher tiers. By the time players reached Tier 6, they could defeat even Tier 6 gods with a perfectly mastered saint-ranked mana technique. Although Shifeng was only at Tier 4 right now, he was still a tricky opponent nonetheless. So what if it's a saint-ranked mana technique? Florence glared at Shifeng. Then, he spoke to the other three through a private channel. We might not be a match for him in a frontal clash, but we can whittle him down. Using a saint-ranked mana technique is incredibly taxing. How many times do you think he can use it? Shifeng indeed deserved to be called a monster if he could perfectly master a saint-ranked mana technique. However, Shifeng was currently only a Tier 4 player. In a situation where stamina and concentration were limited, Shifeng could only use his saint-ranked mana technique a few times. If he couldn't kill all four of them in one move, they could easily whittle him down and kill him. It seems that's our only option. I'll block his attacks while you guys find opportunities to strike, Melissa said before starting to chant an incantation. Immediately, gigantic serpents measuring over 1,000 meters in length emerged from the surrounding sea, their appearance instantly dwarfing Florence's golden lion. The other three nodded. Then, they each took out a master regeneration potion from their bags, drank it, and went into action. Dark Banner Melissa was known to be invincible at sea because of her nigh impeccable defensive capabilities. Moreover, so long as she was at a place with dense water-type mana, she could recover her HP, mana, stamina, and concentration rapidly. So long as she didn't get killed instantly, she could quickly make a full recovery and whittle down any player of the same tier. Do you really think you can outlast me? Shifeng remained calm even after seeing that his opponents did not intend to duke it out with him. He could tell what was going through the minds of these four players. There was a basic guideline for players on what to do should they come across an expert who had perfectly mastered a saint-ranked mana technique as an opponent, flee or drag out the battle. Shifeng had come across many opponents who had tried the latter option against him during his previous life. Their strategy was always the same, to kite him with ranged attacks. They would never try to fight him at close range. After saying so, Shifeng held the Winter of Eternal Night horizontally before him. Subsequently, 9 frost swords appeared next to One Step and the others and promptly lashed out at them. Swords orbit. Each frost sword carried 120% of Shifeng's strength. Shifeng originally had greater strength than One Step and the others already. So, the four had to go all out just to block even one frost sword. When faced with the attacks of 2 frost swords simultaneously, One Step and the others didn't even have the time to breathe. Even Melissa, who possessed nigh impeccable defensive capabilities, could only focus all her attention on blocking the 3 frost swords attacking her. She did not have any spare energy to focus on Shifeng. For a time, apart from Melissa, One Step and the others started to get pushed back one time after another, their HP rapidly decreasing. Damn it! How is his strength so high? Florence cursed. Whenever he clashed with Shifeng's frost swords, the phantom of the golden lion he summoned would darken slightly. Not only did the golden lion's massive body not bring him any advantages, but it was even holding him back now as it gave Shifeng a bigger target to strike. While Florence was in the midst of blocking a frost sword, Shifeng suddenly appeared within 50 yards of him and swung his long sword. Holy Devour! Crimson flames covered the sky once more. Even though Florence had responded to Shifeng's attack immediately by doubling his defense and HP with a life-saving skill, he still lost 1/5 of his HP to the attack. Thank goodness I blocked it. Florence sighed in relief when he saw that he was still alive. However, before Florence could distance himself from Shifeng, another tide of flames assaulted him. Upon seeing this, he instinctively raised the golden lion's paws to defend himself. Boom! Florence was sent flying over a dozen yards backward this time. However, before he could even stabilize his posture, a third flame pillar came at him again. Fuck! What is going on here? Florence was stupefied when he saw the third fiery tidal wave approaching him. Unfortunately, even though Florence had executed a defensive combat technique to block this third attack, he failed to execute the technique perfectly due to his unstable posture. As a result, when the tide of flames devoured him, he instantly lost all of his remaining HP. 3 times. Shifeng had used Holy Devour 3 times consecutively. He did not rest for even a moment in between these 3 executions. It was as if the mana technique did not cost him anything to execute, and he used it as casually as if he were using an ordinary combat technique. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 273, Horror. Chapter 273, Horror 3. He used 3 Saint Mana techniques in a row. Is he a monster? Melissa, desperately defending herself against the 3 frost swords attacking her, couldn't believe what she had just seen. She was a magical class player who had perfectly mastered 10 mana techniques, so she had a great understanding of mana techniques. Even an advanced mana technique would put a significant toll on a Tier 4 player's concentration, let alone a Saint Mana technique. If a Tier 4 player were to use a Saint Mana technique, not only would they deplete a significant portion of their concentration, but they would also fall into a fatigued state for a short time. In this fatigued state, even focusing their mind would be a difficult task, let alone executing 2 more Saint-ranked mana techniques consecutively. The information we got is completely wrong. One Step's eyes twitched when he saw Florence's vanishing corpse. According to their intelligence report, Black Flame should only be an ordinary 4th floor expert. The only reason he managed to kill Balrog Heart was that he had gotten promoted to Tier 4. However, the strength Shifeng had just displayed was not something an ordinary 4th floor expert could have. Shifeng was practically a monster. Even One Step doubted he could survive the 3 consecutive attacks Shifeng had used against Florence. It should be known that Florence would gain HP and defense, surpassing even MTS of the same tier when he went into his Golden Lion form. After activating his Tier 4 life-saving skill, his HP would instantly exceed 10 million. Even if he simply stood still and did nothing, a berserker of the same tier would need some time to kill him. Although One Step was a berserker, he was only superior to Florence when it came to strength and speed. When it came to taking damage, he was nowhere near as durable as Florence. That's one down. After collecting the loot Florence dropped, Shifeng turned his gaze to One Step and Convict, saying, "You 2 are next." As a Saint Mana technique, Holy Devour indeed cost a lot of concentration to use. However, after Shifeng became a Tier 4 Sword Law Saint, his concentration underwent a qualitative transformation. Now, his concentration neared the Tier 5 standard already. Hence, he could use Holy Devour multiple times in a row. Moreover, 3 times wasn't his limit yet. According to his estimates, he should only reach his limit after executing 5 Holy Devours consecutively. Do you think you still have a chance to kill us? One Step said after taking a deep breath, his voice still as confident as before. We've seen your trump card already, but you still don't know what our trump cards are. However, we do not wish to use our trump cards for no reason. Since you've killed Florence already, how about we leave it at that? I agree, Convict said in conjunction. We've already seen your strength, Guild Leader Black Flame. You won't be able to kill us even if you try, so we should just stop for today. If we fight, we will only be giving the other powers an advantage. Shifeng's ability to execute 3 Saint Mana techniques consecutively was indeed astonishing. However, Shifeng could only kill them under the precondition that they didn't know about this ability. Now that they knew what to expect of Shifeng, it would become extremely difficult for Shifeng to kill them. After all, they had their own trump cards. It was just that they didn't wish to use these trump cards. However, so long as they used their trump cards, Shifeng could do nothing against them. On the contrary, they might even have a chance of killing Shifeng. However, they prepared to use these trump cards for the medium shipyard competition later. If they used them now, the other hegemonic powers would definitely come up with a counter. How funny. You were the ones who attacked me first, yet you are saying that we should stop fighting now? Shifeng laughed. Do you think I'm some kind of pushover? Don't go too far, Black Flame. You might be strong, but you're not invincible. One Step coldly said. If we disregard all costs and attack you, you won't be getting away easily. It'll also be impossible for you to kill us. Let me see what kind of ability you people have, then, Shifeng said, chuckling before manipulating his frost swords to attack once more. With Florence out of the way, One Step and Convict had to face 3 frost swords simultaneously. A sword's orbit executed by 3 frost swords simply wasn't something the two could defend against, so their HP quickly fell. 1 Steps and Convict's HP fell below the 30% mark in less than 5 seconds. Even a master regeneration potion wasn't enough to help them mitigate the incoming damage. Eventually, 1 Step took a deep breath and signaled Convict with his eyes. Then, he glared at Shifeng and bellowed, "Black Flame, you forced our hand." As soon as 1 Step finished speaking, his body suddenly expanded into a 10-meter-tall giant, and a demonic glow enveloped his body. In addition, the aura he exuded was so powerful that it had started to destabilize the space around him. Tier 4 Legacy Skill, Titan Awakening. All basic attributes increased by 200%. Since you've made me use this move, don't even think of leaving this place alive today. Immediately, 1 Step brandished his greatsword, which had similarly been enlarged to have a 10-meter-long blade, knocking away all 6 frost swords over 100 yards away with just 2 sword lights. Then, he appeared within 100 yards of Shifeng and sent over a dozen sword lights flying at Shifeng, thoroughly sealing all of Shifeng's escape routes. As for Convict, he quietly observed the exchange. His plan was to fight a battle of attrition with Shifeng, so he decided to let 1 Step attack Shifeng without him for now. If 1 Step could finish Shifeng off, great. If not, he would strike when Shifeng was exhausted. "Is this all you have?" Shifeng couldn't help but chuckle when he saw the sword lights attacking him and sealing his escape routes. Then, the winter of eternal night he wielded suddenly transformed into a stream of energy that flowed into his body. Godslayer. Immediately, Shifeng's mana and concentration increased to an unprecedented height. At the same time, his naturally formed mana domain also transformed, and a miniature world began to expand with him at the center. Halt! As soon as Shifeng spoke, the sword lights approaching him abruptly stopped, and the energy used to compose them vanished without a trace. In addition, before anyone realized it, Shifeng had already appeared in front of 1 Step and grabbed the blade of 1 Step's greatsword with his right hand. Not only did the greatsword lose all of its ability to move, but it didn't even manage to reduce Shifeng's HP by 1 point. For a time, both 1 Step and Convict were stupefied. At the same time, a look of horror also gradually appeared on their faces. World creation. Impossible. Melissa, still busy defending herself against Shifeng's frost swords, uttered these words under her breath in shock and disbelief. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 274, Consecutive Falls. Chapter 274, Consecutive Falls. This is spatial imprisonment. When Convict noticed the space surrounding him had become frozen solid and saw Shifeng grabbing 1 Step's enlarged greatsword with one hand, his expression turned incredibly grave. World creation? 1 Step was one of Divine Hunter's veteran paragons. Although he no longer had the legendary weapon and equipment he used in the Greater God's domain, he could still unleash tremendous strength when he went all out. Even at Tier 4, with the help of his Titan bloodline and swordsmanship, he could hold his ground against Tier 5 monsters of the same level. Tier 5 monsters. These existences were leagues above Tier 4 mythic monsters. They were moving disasters capable of single-handedly destroying an entire kingdom, and not even a force of several Tier 5 players would be enough to kill a Tier 5 monster. So, one could easily imagine how powerful 1 Step was after going all out to be able to hold his ground against a Tier 5 monster. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was unrivaled among Tier 4 players when it came to frontal confrontations. This was also why Divine Hunters had chosen to let 1 Step get promoted to Tier 4 first instead of Balrog Heart. Previously, if anyone were to tell Convict that someone could receive 1 Step's all-out attack with their bare hands, he would definitely think that this person was high. But now, such a scene had taken place before his very eyes. In Convict's mind, the only thing that could allow a player to accomplish such an absurd feat was World Creation's spatial imprisonment ability. However, World Creation logically shouldn't be something Tier 4 players could achieve. Even among Tier 5 players, World Creation was something that could only be achieved by paragons who had mastered mana to an incredibly high standard. This was because World Creation was the act of subliming one's mana domain into a miniature world, transforming the space that one's mana covered into one's own world. Meanwhile, within this world, be it space or mana, everything would be subjected to the caster's will. An example would be the current situation. Even though Convict was surrounded by air, he felt as if he was trapped within a block of metal. The ambient mana that he could previously use to his favor had also become a poison that constantly tried to invade and erode his body. In this situation, he had no choice but to focus a significant portion of his own mana on defending against the invading mana. Otherwise, his body would get eroded and ruined in no time. Meanwhile, when One Step saw Shafeng looking at him with a smile, he subconsciously shuddered and hurriedly shouted to his two allies in the distance, "Convict, Melissa, attack. Otherwise, none of us will leave here alive." Shafeng's strength had completely exceeded their imaginations. Any Tier 5 player capable of grasping world creation would be invincible under Tier 6. Although Shafeng was only at Tier 4 right now, One Step did not think, even for a moment, that he could face Shafeng in a frontal confrontation. It was just like the current situation. So long as Shafeng wanted to, he could suppress him with just a thought. Even his berserk skill would be rendered useless. Currently, their only hope of escaping with their lives was to split Shafeng's attention. World creation's spatial imprisonment was incredibly taxing to maintain. It might be fine if it was used against only one opponent, but against multiple players, a world creation expert would have no choice but to weaken the spatial imprisonment they placed on each target. Otherwise, their mind would have trouble keeping up, and they would leave themselves open to attacks. Meanwhile, the average world creation expert could only exhibit a thorough spatial imprisonment when going up against one opponent. If they wanted to suppress two or more targets, the power of their spatial imprisonment would grow weaker and weaker. We are hosted novel, find us on Google. Of course, even the natural suppression effect of world creation wasn't something the average Tier 4 experts could resist. A Tier 4 expert would need to have Tier 5 combat power, at the very least, to fight normally. Meanwhile, the scene of One Step calling for help stunned not only the various powers on the sea but also Melissa, who had already planned to conduct a rescue even before One Step's call for help. Nobody thought that One Step, a representative of Divine Hunters, would ask Shadow Emperor Convict and Dark Banner Melissa for help. It should be known that Divine Hunters and Morning Light were rivals. Previously, it was precisely because One Step worried that he would get backstabbed by Morning Light's duo that he had kept his guard up around the two and chose to clash with Shafeng without their help. Yet, now, One Step had seemingly stopped caring about this concern. He had even planned to execute a pincer attack with Convict and Melissa. Not even the top 10 experts on the God-ranked expert list had received such treatment from One Step before. It seems we cannot hold back anymore. Convict took a deep breath when he saw that Shafeng remained unscathed even until this moment. "Melissa, we'll attack together. It seems that's our only option," Melissa said, sighing as she put away her flag with a pained expression. "I originally planned to save this for the God list's top 10 monsters. I never thought I would use it on an unknown expert. What a loss this is." When Melissa finished speaking, a golden bone spear appeared in her hands. Immediately afterward, mana began congregating around Melissa, Shafeng's spatial imprisonment having no effect on her whatsoever. Then, in the blink of an eye, an army of fully armed NPCs appeared around Melissa. Every one of these NPCs was at level 125, Tier 4. These NPCs numbered 100, and they wore standardized equipment sets that joined together to form a complex battle array. Under the effects of this battle array, these Tier 4 NPCs became immune to the suppression of Shafeng's world creation. While the army of Tier 4 NPCs was flying toward Shafeng, Convict, wielding his two short swords, transformed into an untouchable shadow that appeared behind Shafeng in the blink of an eye. As for One Step, not willing to be overshadowed, put greater strength into his arms and shook away Shafeng's hand that was holding onto his great sword. Then, he promptly brandished his weapon and swung 3 black moons at Shafeng. The power of the black moons was so great that not even Shafeng's world creation could influence them. This scene caused the various powers members watching from the sea's surface to gasp. So, these are Divine Hunters and Morning Light's apex combatants. The strength One Step, Convict, and Melissa were currently displaying greatly shocked even the various hegemonic powers titled experts. Even an NPC city would crumble in the face of such might, let alone a single Tier 4 player. Interesting. I didn't think you three still had more cards to use. Shifeng chuckled when he saw the trio before him increasing their strength even further. Then, without any foreshadowing, he abruptly executed a horizontal slash at his surroundings with the Winter of Eternal Night. Third sword, Holy Annihilation. This was the final move of the Holy Annihilation mana technique. Usually, it wasn't a technique that could be used at Tier 4. However, under the strengthening effect of Godslayer, Shifeng could use this move normally now. At this moment, be it One Step, Convict, Melissa, or the spectating players down below, everyone felt as if time had stopped, none capable of moving their bodies. The only thing that remained in motion was Shifeng's Winter of Eternal Night. Subsequently, when Shifeng's Winter of Eternal Night came into contact with One Step's 3 black moons, the black moons split apart as if they were made of paper. Then, Shifeng's sword passed through One Step's gigantic body and Convict's incorporeal body. Meanwhile, all One Step and Convict could do was watch all this happen. When Shifeng completed his slash, time began moving normally again. At the same time, Titan Sword One Step's and Shadow Emperor Convict's bodies split into 2 halves that fell into the sea down below. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 275, Crying Sea City Shocked. Chapter 275, Crying Sea City Shocked Their Dead. When One Step's and Convict's corpses fell into the sea, Melissa momentarily forgot to command her NPC army, the corners of her eyes trembling slightly as she looked at Shifeng in horror. Indeed, Melissa, a veteran paragon of morning light and an existence standing at the top of the greater god's domain, was currently experiencing fear. After all, how could she not be afraid? Strong as One Step and Convict were, the two of them together had fallen to just 1 slash from Shifeng. For a moment, Melissa couldn't help but wonder if Shifeng truly was just a Tier 4 player. Before Melissa could recover from her shock, she saw Shifeng collecting the items One Step and Convict dropped and appearing within 100 yards of her. Despite 100 Tier 4 NPCs guarding Melissa, Shifeng behaved as if these NPCs did not exist as he calmly said to Melissa, "You're the only one left. You should reveal whatever cards you have left. I know this isn't all you have." Melissa was different from the 3 experts he had just defeated. During his previous life, the other 3 experts' highest achievement was becoming titled experts. Melissa, on the other hand, had been conferred the position of Grand Elder in the 7 Luminaries Alliance. Even her title at that time was different from her current title. Immortal Queen, this was Melissa's true title. And the reason for this title was because not once had Melissa died an actual death in God's domain. When she heard Shifeng's words, Melissa's fear instantly turned into surprise. Then, after taking a deep breath, she looked at Shifeng and said, "You're a really terrifying person. You've never let your guard down in the slightest. You still have your full attention on me even until this very moment. Why? Do you not think you are worthy of this attention?" Shifeng, the number of people conferred with the position of Grand Elder in the 7 Luminaries Alliance did not even reach double digits. Every one of these existences was a monster among monsters, and not even apex powers would dare to offend them. Although Melissa was only a titled expert currently and had even entered the miniature ancient world, her true strength definitely wasn't limited to what she had shown thus far. Otherwise, she couldn't have become Morning Light's 3rd Vice Guild leader at such a young age. If one were to compare the performances of Shadow Emperor Convict and Melissa during this battle, Convict would be in no way inferior to Melissa. Yet, Convict was only the commander of a trump card legion in Morning Light. It was also the case with Titan Sword One Step, his position in Divine Hunters being only that of a trump card legion's commander. Hence, Melissa absolutely wasn't as simple as she portrayed herself. "Although I don't know how you noticed it, I will be withdrawing for today," Melissa said after taking a deep breath. Before anyone realized it, a stone covered in divine runes had appeared in her hand. Then, she crushed the stone, which, in turn, caused her body to begin fading out of existence in front of everyone's eyes. But do not think you can establish a foothold in Crying Sea City just because you've defeated the four of us. What you've done today is simply incite us even further. You have no idea what kind of existences you have offended. Shifeng looked at Melissa's fading figure. Then, he faintly smiled and said, "We'll see about that." He dared to challenge even apex powers during his previous life, let alone the current divine hunters and morning light. After Melissa disappeared, it took a while for the various powers experts down below to react. She fled. She withdrew, just like that. When everyone looked at the vanishing NPC army, they felt like they were in a dream. They simply couldn't understand why Melissa had chosen to run away. After all, if Melissa chose to fight, she wasn't without a chance of killing Shifeng. It should be known that Melissa had an army of 100 Tier 4 NPCs at her command. Moreover, these NPCs were empowered by a battle array. Even if Shifeng had the ability to kill one step and convict in a single move, his chances of winning against 100 Tier 4 NPCs wouldn't be very high. After all, NPCs weren't players. They had much more HP than players. They also possessed many more Tier 4 skills and spells than players. A force of 100 Tier 4 NPCs was enough to slay even Tier 5 monsters. Facing the encirclement of 100 Tier 4 NPCs, even Shifeng would need to kill Melissa as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would be whittled down and killed by the NPCs. In addition, Melissa was known to be invincible at sea. She would be a troublesome foe for anyone incapable of killing her instantly. So, the odds of winning should be evenly split between the two. It simply didn't make sense for Melissa to withdraw so soon. Melissa is still as mysterious as always, Favre thought when she saw Melissa disappearing. Then, she looked at Shifeng, a hint of curiosity appearing in her eyes as she wondered, could Black Flame still have more strength hidden? Favre would be lying if she said she wasn't shocked by Shifeng's accomplishment. Shifeng had faced 4 Tier 4 titled experts simultaneously. Yet, he had emerged victorious, killing 3 of his 4 opponents and scaring the last one into fleeing. Moreover, he had even killed 2 veteran paragons in a single move. However, Favre understood Melissa very well. Melissa had always been an incredibly mysterious person. Nobody had ever seen Melissa dying before. She had survived even when she went against a Tier 6 god as a Tier 5 player in the Greater God's domain. Yet, even though her current opponent was only a Tier 4 player, Melissa had chosen to flee without putting up a fight. This was very uncharacteristic of Melissa. The only explanation Favre could think of was that Melissa had noticed something that left her with no choice but to escape. While the various powers were left puzzled by this outcome, Hidden Soul, Liu Wusheng, and the other members of Azura grew ecstatic over this situation. He won. Guild leader Black Flame is amazing. He killed 3 out of 4 of Divine Hunters and Morning Light's Tier 4 expert. This is going to be a huge loss for the 2 guilds. With this, our mercenary alliance will have a real chance at securing Crying Sea City's medium shipyard. Previously, the Azura Mercenary Alliance could only barely survive in Crying Sea City. The Mercenary Alliance simply could not compete with the myriad world superpowers, let alone the hegemonic powers. However, now that Shifeng had shown himself strong enough to win against 4 of Divine Hunters and Morning Light's Tier 4 experts, the Azura Mercenary Alliance would likely secure an administrative spot in Crying Sea City's medium shipyard. Then, with the advanced ships that could be created through the medium shipyard, Azura could quickly make up for its lack of capable experts out at sea. Moreover, with the Primordial Tower's training effect, the Azura Mercenary Alliance would definitely grow stronger as a whole as time passed. Combined with the medium shipyard, it would only be a matter of time before Azura became a hegemonic power in the miniature ancient world. This was something not even the 5 great super guilds would dare to dream of accomplishing. News of Divine Hunters and Morning Light's encirclement failing quickly spread throughout Crying Sea City and caused an uproar. Nobody thought the city's top 2 guilds would be hiding Tier 4 experts. Even more surprising was that these 4 Tier 4 titled experts had suffered a miserable defeat at the hands of an expert hardly anybody knew about. In no time, the name of Black Flame became known by everyone in Crying Sea City. The myriad world's various powers began frantically looking into Black Flame's identity to try and understand his past. Not even Zero Wing was spared from their investigations. While the Myriad Worlds powers were investigating Black Flame and Zero Wing. On a large floating island in the real world, an impromptu meeting was being held in the top-floor conference room of the Green God Corporation's main headquarters. At this time, a young beauty looking to be in her early 20s cautiously looked toward the young woman sitting at the head of the conference table and said, "Vice President, according to our latest information, Zero Wing's Black Flame has killed 3 of Divine Hunters and Morning Light's Tier 4 titled experts, and it is very likely that the Azura Mercenary Alliance will secure a spot in Crying Sea City's medium shipyard in the future. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 276, God List Rankings. Chapter 276, God List Rankings. Zero Wing? Something came to Xia Qingying's mind when she heard this name. Then, she looked at the young beauty reporting to her and asked, "Lu Wen, are you talking about the Zero Wing that received 5 million star coins from the Galaxy Corporation?" "That's right." The young beauty named Lu Wen nodded. "Shi Feng, Zero Wing's member who we sent to Star Lake City previously, has performed excellently in the Star Lake Legion selection, coming in 100th place on his first attempt at the test. If Zero Wing can secure Crying Sea City's medium shipyard, it is likely to grow into a hegemonic power in the future. If Zero Wing has the Green God Corporation's resource assistance on top of that, it is 100% certain to become a hegemonic power. Zero Wing indeed has a lot of potential," Xia Qingying said, nodding as she read Zero Wing's information. Although it has only been established recently, its development in the miniature ancient world is rapid. Zero Wing also has an expert like Black Flame. With Black Flame's recent achievement, he should get into the God List's top 10 in the next update if nothing unexpected crops up. Moreover, Zero Wing can more or less be considered a local power of our world, so it indeed qualifies to be nurtured by the Green God Corporation. "Isn't it too early to make a decision?" Vice President Xia, a young, handsome man, suddenly spoke up. "Zero Wing might have good potential, but the Green God Corporation's resources don't fall from the sky. We cannot afford to waste the resources we've had to go to great lengths to earn in the greater world. Otherwise, we won't have enough to give to powers with true potential." The dozen or so Green God Corporation executives present nodded in agreement with the young man's words. "That's right. The corporation's resources are earned from many years of effort and accumulation in the greater world. Now that our world's survival relies on these resources, we must maximize the use of every bit. Indeed, we should choose our partners well. We have only been nurturing individual experts previously. Although some of these individuals have made some achievements in the greater world, most of them have merely been a waste of our resources. None of them have managed to climb into the upper echelons of the various cities and gain true authority. Now that we are trying to nurture entire powers to give our world some authority in the God's Domain Association, we must be even more careful with our resources. We will not have a second chance if we invest in the wrong power." The executives voiced their opinions one after another, all of them agreeing with the young man's words. They didn't think the young man was overstepping his boundaries by speaking against Xia Yingqing. After all, the young man was Jiang Yao, the new vice president appointed by the president. Moreover, Jiang Yao earned this position by making a considerable contribution. Specifically, he had helped the Green God Corporation form a partnership with a corporation in the greater world, saving the Green God Corporation a lot of trouble in its upcoming plans. Even if Zero Wing receives the Green God Corporation's support, it will only become an ordinary hegemonic power in the future. However, an ordinary hegemonic power is useless to our world, Jiang Yao continued when he saw that the other executives agreed with him. What we need is an upper-ranking hegemonic power. We've previously already agreed that the Flower of Seven Sins is the most likely power in our world to become an upper-ranking hegemonic power in the greater God's domain. We currently only have 1 Grade 1 resource and 4 Grade 2 resource recommendation slots. But if you find that Zero Wing is a qualified candidate, we can give Zero Wing a Grade 2 resource slot, Vice President Xia. None of the executives present voiced an opinion against Jiang Yao's suggestion. The Flower of Seven Sins' recent performance was clear for all to see. Currently, Thousand Scars had already climbed to the 41st rank in the Star Lake Legion selection and completed the Paimon Corporation's test. Now that she had become an internal member of the Paimon Corporation, she had a very high chance of joining the corporation's middle management in the future. As for the miniature ancient world side, the Flower of Seven Sins had achieved meteoric growth when it came to its experts. Currently, the Flower of Seven Sins already had more than 50 God-ranked experts and several fourth-floor experts. It even had 2 monsters on the main continent who were nearly as strong as the top 10 monsters on the miniature ancient world's God-ranked expert list. The Flower of Seven Sins' comprehensive strength was vastly superior to Zero Wing. If the Flower of Seven Sins could receive the Green God Corporation's resource assistance, it probably wouldn't take long to become a hegemonic power. Of course, that wasn't to say Zero Wing was weak. While it might not match the Flower of Seven Sins' potential, it had Black Flame, an expert capable of entering the God-ranked expert list's top 10. Black Flame's presence would increase Zero Wing's fame in the myriad worlds significantly, so the guild similarly had great growth potential. As you wish. Xia Qingying frowned at the executive's reaction. However, she did not speak any further. Others might not know how the Flower of Seven Sins had suddenly achieved such explosive growth in its God-ranked expert count, but Xia Qingying knew it very well. It was only because Jiang Yarrow had given the Flower of Seven Sins the resources in his possession that the Flower of Seven Sins managed to gain such a large batch of God-ranked experts. Meanwhile, there was a significant difference between the Green God Corporation's Grade 1 resource slot and Grade 2 resource slot. Grade 2 resource slots only included resources available in the upper zone, whereas Grade 1 resource slots included resources in the greater world. There was at least a tenfold gap simply in the basic resources offered, let alone the resources provided for nurturing core experts. However, Jiang Yarrow was also right in saying that the Green God Corporation did not need to nurture an ordinary hegemonic power. Instead, it needed an upper-ranking hegemonic power that could gain real authority in the God's Domain Association. Zero Wing certainly had great potential, but there was no hope for it to become an upper-ranking hegemonic power in the greater God's Domain. The difference in resources and expert count between the Flower of Seven Sins and Zero Wing was simply too massive. Had Zero Wing started its development 10 years earlier, it might have had a chance at acquiring the Grade 1 resource slot. Unfortunately, reality was a cruel mistress. Miniature Ancient World, Crying Sea City. Because of Shi Feng's battle outside the city, a swarm of local experts had flooded Zero Wing's temporary residence in the Adventurers Association to apply for the guild. Meanwhile, in the association's lobby, the various foreign powers members also discussed Zero Wing, the scene causing local players to feel a sense of pride. It was especially true for Zero Wing's members. In the past, whenever the various foreign players came to the Adventurers Association to pick up quests, they would always be discussing the experts of other gods' domain and wondering which expert could get into the god-ranked expert list and how high these experts could rank. Now, the situation had changed as everyone was discussing and wondering how highly Black Flame would rank on the god-ranked expert list. For the time being, everyone was certain Black Flame could get into the top 10, though how highly he could place within the top 10 was still up for debate. However, even if Black Flame only came in 10th place, it would still be of significant help to Zero Wing. After all, before today, everyone who managed to get within the God-ranked expert list's top 10 came from a higher God's Domain and sat in high positions in the Greater World's God's Domain Association. Meanwhile, the benefits of having such a position in the God's Domain Association would help a power greatly in the Greater God's Domain. Zero Wing's temporary residence, Guild Leader's office. I have already relayed all the information the Green God Corporation wishes to convey to you, Guild Leader Black Flame. So long as you sign the contract, Zero Wing will receive the Green God Corporation's Grade 2 resource slot and the corporation's full support in the Greater God's Domain. In exchange, the corporation only asks for 20% of Zero Wing's shares. Lu Wen, a level 124 oracle dressed in a red sacred robe and going by the name of Colorful Lunarite in-game, said. The Green God Corporation might not be as powerful as the Greater World's conglomerates, but it is still a mid to upper level corporation in the Greater World. It can offer significant development assistance to a power in the Greater God's Domain. I'm sure you should know about this, Guild Leader Black Flame. This is indeed a tempting offer, Shifeng said, nodding. However, he then shook his head and continued, but I cannot agree to it. This is a condition no other corporation in the greater world will offer to Zero Wing, guild leader Black Flame. The reason the Green God Corporation is willing to do so is to support local forces, Colorful Lunarite said. She was greatly confused by Shifeng's answer. She couldn't understand why Shifeng would reject such an excellent offer. So long as Zero Wing has the Green God Corporation's assistance, it can quickly grow into a hegemonic power and gain control over many towns, cities, and resource nodes. Zero Wing will not have to worry about not having a living place in the greater world for its members. You are right. Shifeng nodded. Although Colorful Lunarite was a support-focused oracle, the aura she radiated was comparable to Tier 3 titled experts. Moreover, she was ridiculously young, looking no more than 25. Colorful Lunarite's existence was a testament to the Green God Corporation's strength. But the Green God Corporation should be aware that Zero Wing, or more specifically, the Azura Mercenary Alliance, is in conflict with the Flower of Seven Sins. If the Green God Corporation is sincere about this partnership, then dismiss the partnership with the Flower of Seven Sins. Otherwise, Zero Wing will not partner with the Green God Corporation. This is simply not possible. When Colorful Lunarite looked at Shifeng's firm gaze, she couldn't help but feel that the man was crazy. There was no way the Green God Corporation would agree to abandon the Flower of Seven Sins for Zero Wing's sake. It should be known that Zero Wing could only receive this slot because of Xia Qingying's recommendation. Otherwise, the guild wouldn't even be considered for a Grade 2 resource slot. A partnership cannot be formed, then, Shifeng said definitively. Seeing that Shifeng had no intentions of changing his mind, Colorful Lunarite had no choice but to leave and report this matter to Xia Qingying. In Colorful Lunarite's opinion, Shifeng was behaving too arrogantly. He had no idea how large of a gap there existed between Zero Wing and the Flower of Seven Sins. The two couldn't be put on the same scale at all. Shifeng would sooner or later come to regret his decision today. Shortly after Colorful Lunarite left Zero Wing, night fell in Crying Sea City. At this time, the Seven Luminaries Alliance suddenly published a new version of the God-ranked expert list. As soon as the list came out, an uproar occurred in the entire miniature ancient world. This was because the God-ranked expert list's top 5 positions that had never changed since the list's introduction in the miniature ancient world had finally seen a change. There was even a new name among these top 5 positions. Black Flame. 4th place. TL notes, fixed a mistake I made in chapter 257, the 15th of August, 2022. Even a conglomerate like the Green God Corporation even the Green God Corporation, no idea what I was smoking that day. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 277, Azura Sword Emperor. Chapter 277, Azura Sword Emperor. As night fell in the Dead Soul Sea, a fleet of 30-plus advanced ships docked by a small island. The Dead Soul Sea was a level 125-plus map, and the sea monsters found here were mostly at level 127 or above. Moreover, unlike sea monsters in other places, the Dead Soul Sea's sea monsters were incredibly nimble and hard to kill. Even the various hegemonic powers' main fleets would be reluctant to spend time in this place, let alone spend a night on an island in the Dead Soul Sea. Once night fell in the top of 2 worlds, many sea monsters would leave the sea to rest on islands. Because of this, the density of sea monsters one would come across on islands at night would be at least 10 times greater than during the day. So, very few players would be willing to spend the night on an island. Yet, the players of this fleet of advanced ships behaved oppositely. They showed great enthusiasm when they saw the sea monsters emerging from the sea, their behavior making it seem as if the sea monsters were talking treasure troves. We've collected 97 legacy stones so far, Big Sis Omen. 3 more, and we can synthesize a legacy crystal, Summer Wolf, who had already reached level 121, excitedly reported to Death Omen, who had just single-handedly defeated over a dozen level 127 Grand Lord-ranked sea monsters. Once we have the legacy crystal, you can use it to get promoted to Tier 4, and the Flower of Seven Sins will have its second Tier 4 expert. At that time, we can secure Black Gold City's medium shipyard. The medium shipyard is not going to happen. I might have grown a lot stronger and acquired a special legacy, but even if I reach Tier 4 and work together with Gluttony, we have zero chances at securing a slot in the medium shipyard, Death Omen said, shaking her head. The best we can do is secure a small shipyard. Even reaching Tier 4 is not enough. Summer Wolf exclaimed. If he is only Tier 3, I am confident I can beat him after I reach Tier 4. However, this is Sky Flash we are talking about. He is ranked 5th on the God list. There is no way he is still stuck at Tier 3, Death Omen explained. Only the Great Commander will have a chance at defeating that person under the same tier. Summer Wolf did not doubt Death Omen's judgment. MYB0XN0VEL. When the God-ranked expert list was first introduced into the miniature ancient world, the top 20 positions would see frequent changes in owners. However, it was a different story for the top 5 positions. The owners of those 5 ranks had never changed since the God-ranked expert list appeared, and the 5 players occupying these 5 positions were now labeled as the 5 disasters by the Myriad Worlds powers. The reason these 5 players were labeled as disasters was simple. Should one provoke any of these players, the consequences one suffered would be akin to facing a disaster. Big Sis Omen, what rank do you think Black Flame will receive now that he has single-handedly beaten 4 of Divine Hunters and Morning Light's Tier 4 titled experts? Top 10? Or top 5? Summer Wolf asked curiously. Summer Wolf was personally very curious to learn exactly how powerful the God-ranked expert list's top 20 experts were. Even as a domain realm expert, he couldn't even begin to guess how strong those experts were. This was because every one of those experts was a Beyond Domain Realm expert. Only Death Omen, who had fought against Beyond Domain Realm experts before and could now be considered a titled expert, could answer such a question. Although the 7 Luminaries Alliance would update the God-ranked expert list's rankings once every 3 days, Summer Wolf still couldn't help but wonder what rank Black Flame would receive. Top 5 is out of the question, but he will definitely get into the top 10. If I were to harbor a guess, he should be ranked 7th or 8th, Death Omen said definitively. Unlike Summer Wolf, she had seen Sky Flash, the 5th-ranked player on the God list, in person. When standing in that monster's presence, she only felt despair, and her mind instinctively warned her to stay as far away as possible from him. This was the 2nd player she had felt such a feeling after the Flower of 7 Sins Great Commander. This was also why she felt that only the Great Commander had a chance at defeating Sky Flash. Of course, she also had to admit that Black Flame's performance outside Crying Sea City was astonishing. It was incredible that he managed to kill 3 veteran paragons and repel 1 all by himself. If not for the God list's top 5 players being overly strong, Black Flame could definitely achieve a much higher rank. Shortly after Death Omen finished speaking, a liaison officer of the Flower of 7 Sins suddenly approached her, an excited expression on his face as he held a list he had just finished writing. Commander, the 7 Luminaries Alliance just published a new version of the God-ranked expert list. Here are the latest rankings. Wasn't the God list updated only yesterday? Why did it get updated again now? Summer Wolf grew confused as he received the list. It was common knowledge that the God-ranked expert list would only get updated once every 3 days. This had never changed since the list was introduced in the miniature ancient world. This impromptu update was definitely a first. Not much has changed to the list, Death Omen said as she scanned the list from top to bottom. Then, she saw something that piqued her curiosity as she muttered, "Prayer is in 8th, and Blood Perforation is in 7th? Why have their ranks dropped? Could Black Flame be ranked 6th? As Death Omen continued down the list, her gaze abruptly stopped at the 4th place, her eyes widening in utter disbelief. 4th, Black Flame. MYB0XN0VEL. As for Sky Flash, the person she felt intimidated by, he had fallen to 6th place. There was also a small introduction attached to Black Flame's name. Defeated 4 titled experts outside Crying Sea City, mastered world creation, and slayed 2 titled experts in 1 move. The 7 Luminaries Alliance awards Black Flame the title of Azura Sword Emperor. 4th place. Another disaster. Summer Wolf was similarly dumbfounded by the Seven Luminaries Alliance's latest version of the God-ranked expert list. It should be known that the God list's top 5 experts were individuals greatly feared by even the various hegemonic powers. Moreover, every one of them had monopolized an entire medium shipyard for themselves. Yet, now, another expert of such caliber had appeared. Moreover, this expert was even the flower of Seven Sins' enemy. In a certain upper zone, inside the top-floor office of a Green God Corporation building. "I've tried my best," Vice President Xia, Lu Wen said, sighing after she finished reporting to Xia Qingying regarding Zero Wing's answer to the Green God Corporation's partnership offer. When she recalled Shi Feng's response to the offer, she couldn't help but feel infuriated. Zero Wing's Black Flame is simply a lunatic. He simply refuses to listen to any advice. He even tried to get us to choose between Zero Wing and the Flower of Seven Sins. Shi Feng's achievement of defeating 4 titled experts was indeed amazing. However, such an achievement was nowhere near enough to bridge the gap between Zero Wing and the Flower of Seven Sins. After all, according to the Green God Corporation's evaluation, Zero Wing only had the potential to become an ordinary hegemonic power, whereas the Flower of Seven Sins had the potential to become an upper-ranking hegemonic power. Lunatic. Xia Qingying, sitting behind her desk, smiled when she heard Lu Wen's words. Then, she handed a list to Lu Wen and said, "But I think Black Flame is very sane. Here, take a look at the latest God-ranked expert list." Lu Wen was initially confused by Xia Qingying's words. However, she quickly became stunned when she looked at the list on the desk. God list's 4th place, Azura Sword Emperor. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 278, Metamorphosis. Chapter 278, Metamorphosis 4th on the God list. How is this possible? The anger and dissatisfaction on Lu Wen's face vanished when she saw the updated God-ranked expert list, and replacing those emotions was shock and confusion. Shi Feng had merely defeated 4 titled experts. While such a feat was indeed amazing, it still shouldn't be anywhere near enough to put him on par with those 5 people. This was because every one of those 5 monsters had single-handedly defeated 6 or more titled experts simultaneously ever since they arrived in the miniature ancient world. Every one of them possessed unimaginable strength, and just one of them could serve as the foundation for an ordinary hegemonic power to fight to become an upper-ranking hegemonic power. However, when she stood before Shi Feng previously, she didn't get the feeling that he was a powerhouse at all. She also didn't think that he was concealing his aura from her. While it was true that most experts in God's domain could hide their aura, maintaining this action was exhausting. It was akin to a person blinking. A person might be able to keep themselves from blinking, but it'd be impossible to do so across a long period since it would be extremely uncomfortable. Moreover, even a beyond domain realm expert would have difficulty behaving naturally while maintaining such a state. It was especially true when dealing with experts of her caliber. With her vastly strengthened senses, she would notice even the slightest hint of unnaturalness. The time she spent with Shi Feng was by no means short. If Shi Feng really was suppressing his aura, he definitely couldn't have fooled her. An army of 1,000 is easy to raise, but a capable general is hard to find. An expert of such caliber is indispensable for all powers. Xia Qingying did not try to resolve Lu Wen's confusion. Instead, she looked at the God list with an excited expression as she said, "Even the Green God Corporation is no exception." "Vice President Xia, are you saying that we should, unable to help herself," Lu Wen asked, "agree to Black Flame's condition?" As a talent nurtured by the Green God Corporation, Lu Wen naturally understood the importance of experts of Shi Feng's caliber. In the eyes of the various hegemonic powers and the Green God Corporation, titled experts might be important, but they were by no means indispensable. However, it was a different story for experts capable of going against common sense. But the Flower of Seven Sins was no pushover, either. It was especially true for the organization's mysterious Great Commander. The Great Commander might not be any weaker than Shi Feng when it came to individual prowess. "Visit Zero Wing tomorrow and tell Black Flame that we can negotiate on that matter," Xia Qingying said without hesitation. What if Black Flame still refuses? Lu Wen asked worriedly. Smiling, Xia Qingying looked Lu Wen in the eye and said, "Then, do whatever it takes to get him to agree." Meanwhile, inside Zero Wing's temporary residence. Guild leader, things have gotten crazy in Zero Wing and Azura ever since the latest God-ranked expert list came out, Su Qianliu said as she entered Shifeng's office, a bitter smile on her face. "I was worried about the guild not having enough fresh talent a few days ago, but now, I'm afraid the S-rank nutrient fluids we have on hand are nowhere near enough to meet the demand of all the geniuses we just recruited." The current Zero Wing was in the spotlight of the miniature ancient world, so it was the best opportunity for the guild to develop. Unfortunately, Zero Wing lacked resources, so it couldn't nurture a large number of its own geniuses even if it wanted. Currently, Zero Wing's resources were already stretched thin just after recruiting a little over 10,000 geniuses. Shifeng wasn't surprised by this situation. Instead, he smiled and asked, "How are the main force members' training and bloodline allocation coming along?" Any power that wished to grow stronger in God's domain didn't require only in-game resources. It would also need real-world potions such as S-rank nutrient fluids. Otherwise, the development of the brain would be dragged down due to insufficient nutrition. The various superpowers in God's domain each had their own stable sources to purchase S-rank nutrient fluids. As for first dash, second dash, and third-rate guilds, they didn't have a stable source. This was also why there was such a huge gap between superpowers and non-superpowers. Currently, Zero Wing was in the same predicament as the various non-superpowers. Apart from the S-rank nutrient fluids it earned through nurturing the geniuses of other powers, it didn't have any other sources to acquire S-rank nutrient fluids from. In reality, Su Qianliu had already done very well by keeping Zero Wing's requirements met by relying solely on an unstable source of several hundred bottles of S-rank nutrient fluid. After roughly 2 weeks of effort, the main force members have already grasped the silver combat techniques that are compatible with them. We have also finished allocating the advanced lineage crystals already. We have paid a significant cost to do so, and it's hard to even find advanced lineage crystals sold on the market now, Su Qianliu said, feeling a little proud of herself. Currently, our main force is only inferior to the various hegemonic powers' main force. Even Witches' Sin's main force members are envious of ours. You've worked hard. When Shifeng heard Su Qianliu's report, he could already imagine the envious expressions the various powers would have once they saw Zero Wing's main force. After all, even the various hegemonic powers would have difficulty coming up with a main force of such caliber in the current miniature ancient world. Shifeng also understood that Su Qianliu must have gone through a lot of trouble to accomplish these matters. Be it purchasing silver combat techniques or advanced lineage crystals, both matters required a lot of negotiations with many powers. Moreover, Su Qianliu had to be incredibly careful while conducting these negotiations. Otherwise, if other powers learned of Zero Wing's goal, it would become incredibly difficult for Zero Wing to produce such a main force. "Can you tell me why you need such a main force now, guild leader?" Su Qianliu asked, unable to hold back her curiosity. She had practically burnt all of Abyssal Star City's earnings to develop Zero Wing's main force. No other power would dare to make such a reckless investment. It should be known that this was an investment of tens of millions of gold coins. Such a sum of money was enough to fully arm an army of 10,000 in epic equipment. Yet, Zero Wing had invested such a large sum of money into a mere team of 100 players. "To earn money," Shifeng said, chuckling. "We are going to earn the power necessary for Zero Wing and Azura to take over the entire miniature ancient world. Is such a thing even possible?" Su Qianliu couldn't help but feel that Shifeng was joking with her. Currently, Zero Wing's main force wasn't even strong enough to win against the various hegemonic powers' main force. In such a situation, saying that they were going to earn enough money and power to take over the entire miniature ancient world was no different than talking about fantasy. "It's a little late today. Have everyone gather up tomorrow morning," Shifeng said, smiling. He did not bother giving any additional explanations. If they only had Zero Wing's current main force to rely on, they naturally couldn't take over the miniature ancient world. However, he had the 7 Luminaries Codex. So long as he had a sufficiently strong team, he could easily earn a large amount of resources. Now that the various powers barely had any Tier 4 players, their range of activity in the top of two worlds was considerably limited. They couldn't venture to dangerous areas that were rich in resource nodes. They also couldn't reach the world bosses located in these maps. It should be known that world bosses played a crucial role in the struggle between the various powers. This was because world bosses were tied to something that was of utmost importance to the various powers. Flying mounts. This was an item capable of overturning the status quo in the top of two worlds. With flying mounts, a power could achieve rapid travel between the various cities. This meant that it would no longer have to restrict its base of operations to one particular city. It could also conduct trade with a much larger market. I'll inform the others, then. Although Su Qianliu was curious as to what Shifeng had planned, it was already late at night now. It would be dangerous to carry out an operation outside the city at night. Since Shifeng didn't wish to explain his plan to her, she had no choice but to wait until tomorrow to learn about it. Meanwhile, after Shifeng had finished taking care of matters in God's domain, he went offline to rest. He had remained online for the past several days because of his Tier 4 promotion. Even if the God's Domain Association's virtual gaming cabins allowed players to stay online for long periods, it was still necessary to exercise their real bodies from time to time. When Shifeng climbed out of his virtual gaming cabin, he immediately felt a refreshing feeling as his body bathed in the morning sun's rays. It was as if his body cells were breathing for the first time and brimming with life, and this feeling made him feel like he had grown a lot younger. As expected of the greater world's virtual gaming cabin, the improvements it provides to the body are simply amazing. Shifeng couldn't help but sigh ruefully when he saw that one of the virtual gaming cabin's canisters of life potion was now empty. The God's Domain Association had thoroughly displayed its wealth by offering its members such generous service. Shortly after Shifeng got out of his cabin, the room's AI suddenly reminded him, "Contestant Shifeng, there are 16 days left before the City Legion selection ends. Your placing has fallen to 312th place. If you wish to become an official participant in the Star Lake Legion, you will have to strive to enter the top 100. Currently, you have 2 more free test attempts remaining." 312th? Shifeng was a little surprised to hear the Ari's reminder. It's only been 2 weeks. Are these people improving so quickly? It was rare to see someone's position in a City Legion selection fall from 100th to beyond 300th in only 2 weeks. After all, 2 weeks' time wasn't usually enough for someone to achieve significant growth. It was especially true for people capable of entering the top 100 of a City Legion selection. So be it. I can use this opportunity to test my current standards. After saying so, Shifeng walked out of his room and took the elevator to the first floor. TL notes, regarding the previously assumed differences between bloodline and races, lineage crystals. I have no idea what exactly are the differences between these two things anymore. I previously thought bloodlines were different from races due to the bloodlines mentioned in the main story, e.g., Frost Bloodline, Chapter 1580, Boulder Bloodline, Chapter 1580, Hurricane Bloodline, Chapter 1580, Scorching Flame Bloodline, Chapter 1580, Dark Iron Basic Bloodline, Dark Iron Bloodline, Chapter 1580, Spacetime Bloodline, Chapter 1951. These bloodlines were even assigned ranks such as Basic, Advanced, etc. However, it would seem that the author intends to add a different category meaning for bloodlines. Now, it seems the term bloodline is going to refer to race as well. I'm not sure what the author intends for this term for now. We will only know more should the author decide to clarify things in a future chapter. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 279, Empress Purple Jade. Chapter 279, Empress Purple Jade. God's Domain Association's first floor lobby. Although it was still early in the morning, when Shifeng arrived at the test hall, there were already well over 100 people waiting in line. Most of these people looked quite young, their ages under 25 on average. These youths stood in groups of several people, and each group wore a different type of uniform that indicated their respective origins. While waiting for their turn, these youths wore anxious and excited expressions. At the same time, a hint of contempt also appeared in their eyes when they looked at the participants waiting in line by themselves. No wonder my ranking fell by so much. So it's because the various corporations have begun to make their move. Realization dawned on Chiffon when he saw the youths waiting in line. A city legion's slots were incredibly precious. It was one of the few opportunities for most players to climb their way into the upper echelons of a city. Meanwhile, to the greater world's various corporations, this was also the quickest method to gain authority in a city. Hence, the greater world's various corporations wouldn't just try to recruit people who had successfully entered a city legion. At the same time, they would also nurture their own experts to join the various city legions. This would further increase their authority and influence in the various cities. Meanwhile, the experts the various corporations nurtured were all geniuses carefully selected out of tens of thousands of youths. After receiving the various corporations' training and resources, these youths all came to possess frightening strength. As a result, whenever a city legion selection took place, the various corporations would usually occupy more than half of the available slots. It was especially true for the top 100 ranks, also known as the official participant slots. Over 70% of the official participant slots in a city legion selection would typically go to the various corporations' experts. While Chiffon was about to join the waiting line, a clear voice suddenly came from behind him. What a coincidence, guild leader Chiffon. Are you also here to take the test? The person who spoke was Purple Jade. She just so happened to have walked out of the mental space at this time and saw Chiffon, so she took the initiative to walk over and greet him. She was dressed in a light blue shirt and shorts, and she had her hair tied into a ponytail, her appearance giving her a vibrant feeling. You've never left your room throughout the past 2 weeks. I nearly thought you had lost interest in the selection. Purple Jade's initiative to greet Chiffon quickly attracted many people's attention to Chiffon, everyone looking at Chiffon in surprise and envy. Be it her face or body, Purple Jade could be considered a top-tier beauty even in the greater world. As a result, she could attract a lot of attention simply by relying on her beauty alone. As icing on the cake, her test result that had just appeared on the lobby scoreboard was one that the people in the lobby could only look up to in admiration. Mental grade, 3-star mental strength master, potential rating, 94, mental strength rating, A, mental control rating, A, overall ranking, 47. Anyone capable of entering the selection's top 100 would already be a genius among geniuses. As for those capable of entering the top 50, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they were heaven's favored child. Not to mention, Purple Jade clearly wasn't a genius nurtured by the various corporations. Her growth potential was much greater than experts the various corporations nurtured. If nothing unexpected happened, Purple Jade would have a high possibility of becoming a vice commander in the Star Lake Legion. At that time, she would become a VIP among Star Lake City's upper echelon, and even Star Lake City's various corporations would have to treat her respectfully. Meanwhile, the privilege of having such a talented and beautiful woman take the initiative to greet them was something youths like themselves didn't even dare to dream about happening. I've been somewhat busy recently, Chiffon said. He wasn't particularly surprised by Purple Jade's result. After all, the name of Empress Purple Jade was considerably famous in the greater world during his previous life. So, it was completely normal for her to show such great potential after arriving in the greater world. Then, Chiffon smiled and continued, "It seems you have made significant improvements in the time we haven't met, Commander Jade. With this, you are guaranteed to become an official participant in the Star Lake Legion." I'm not so sure about that. When Purple Jade looked at her ranking, she shook her head and said, there might only be 2 weeks left before the selection ends, but the various corporations still aren't done trying. So, I'm still not certain I can stay within the top 100 by the time the selection ends. After staying in the greater world for the past 2 weeks, she realized just how frightening of a place this was. The so-called Tier 6 God-ranked experts that their homeworld held in high regard were nothing in the greater world. The resources the greater world's geniuses had access to were also beyond their homeworld's imagination. Life potions that were treated as priceless treasures in their homeworld's upper zones were practically no different from drinking water in the greater world. Not to mention, the greater world had even higher ranking potions than the life potion. Shortly after Shifeng and Purple Jade began conversing, a commotion suddenly occurred in the lobby. At this time, an elegant young man with long hair could be seen walking out of an elevator, and behind the young man followed 4 men and women wearing suits and sunglasses. These 4 men and women exuded a powerful aura. The moment they stepped out of the elevator, the people standing in their way subconsciously stepped aside. It was obvious that their mental strength had reached the Grandmaster standard already. The young man had 4 one-star mental strength Grandmasters serving as his bodyguard. This was a rare sight, even in Star Lake City. Any mental strength Grandmaster could take on temporary positions in the various cities' administration. 4 one-star mental strength Grandmasters under the age of 50, they could even receive the various cities' priority training. Yet, all 4 of the young man's bodyguards were clearly under 50. Who is that guy? He actually has 4 one-star mental strength Grandmasters working as his bodyguards. How can you not know about him? He's the Dawn Light Corporation's second young master, Chen Chitian. Chen Chitian? The one who's ranked 25th on the scoreboard? That's right. Also, you must have heard about Chen Chitian's elder brother, right? Chen Chalin, the Star Lake Legion's Paragon-level vice commander. The crowd in the lobby quickly began a discussion among themselves when they saw Chen Chitian, shock coloring their faces when they spoke about the young man and his background. The Dawn Light Corporation might not be a conglomerate, but its influence in Star Lake City still ranked within the top 5 among the various corporations. Meanwhile, a large part of the reason for that was because of Chen Chalin. However, after seeing Chen Chitian, everyone felt that the Dawn Light Corporation's influence in Star Lake City would become even greater in the future. This was because Chen Chitian's talent was not the slightest bit inferior to Chen Chalin. On the contrary, Chen Chitian looked superior to his elder brother. After all, when Chen Chalin joined the Star Lake Legion, he had done so with a result of 43rd place in his selection. Meanwhile, Chen Chitian was currently ranked 25th in the selection. It was just that Chen Chitian was challenging his test at an older age than when Chen Chalin challenged his selection. Wait. Chen Chitian looks like he's coming over to the test hall. Didn't he just test himself 3 days ago? Don't tell me he improved again in such a short time. I doubt that. How much progress can a person possibly make in just 3 days? When the crowd in the lobby saw Chen Chitian making his way to the test hall, they couldn't help but grow confused and curious. After all, Chen Chitian was one of the heirs of the Dawn Light Corporation. He should have received the best training and resources money could buy from a young age, so he should have fully tapped into his potential already. It was highly unlikely that he would achieve significant growth in only 3 days. While everyone was wondering about Chen Chitian's purpose in visiting the test hall, Chen Chitian walked up to an inconspicuous person standing amidst the crowd. When Chen Chitian saw the ordinary sweatsuit Shifeng wore, a flash of disdain appeared in his eyes as he asked, "Are you Zero Wings Shifeng?" "That's right. Do you have business with me?" Shifeng asked, confused as to why Chen Chitian would suddenly approach him. "Good." After taking another look at Shifeng, Chen Chitian coldly said, "I see that you have good potential. So long as you leave Zero Wing and receive Miss Thousand Scars forgiveness, I will ensure that your needs will be met for the rest of your life in Star Lake City. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,